going to look at signed numbers, so numbers that are above and below 0. Numbers that are above 0 or to the right of 0 on a number line are positive. Numbers that are to the left of 0 or below 0 are negative. We can plot numbers on the number line. If we wanted to graph or plot positive 2, we would just find it and make a point. If we wanted to graph negative 3, we would find it on the number line as below 0 and make a point. Let's look at two situations and see if we would consider it a positive number or a negative number. The first one, 500 feet below sea level. So sea level would be our 0. If it's above it, it would be positive. If it's below it, we would denote it as a negative number. So 500 feet below sea level. So we would denote this one as a negative 500. The other one, the stock market rose 200 points. Your 0 would be the closing of the previous day. So if it dropped below that, it would be negative. If it went above it, we would denote it as a positive number. So it rose. That means it's going above. So we would mark this one as a positive 200. Next, we'll look at order on the number line. As you go toward the left, it gets smaller. As you go toward the right, it gets bigger. We will have some problems where we need to determine the order. They will ask us to choose greater than, less than, or equal to. If we look at 1 and 3, the 1 is more to the left of the 3, so it is going to be smaller. So we would choose the less than symbol. If we have 5 and negative 2, 5 would be over here. It is to the right of negative 2, so it is larger. So we should choose the greater than symbol. If we have negative 4 and negative 1, this is the side that might be newer to us. Notice the negative 4 is to the left of negative 1, so it is smaller. So we need to choose the less than symbol. We need a couple of definitions. The first is absolute value. The absolute value of a number is its distance from 0. The notation for absolute value is long straight marks, longer than the number, and the number will be inside. This notation is asking us how far is 2 away from 0. Let's look at it on the number line, and we'll find the 2 and find the 0. And it is 2 spaces. What about the absolute value of negative 2? So we'll go on the number line and find the negative 2. And we count the spaces, 1, 2. So it is also 2 spaces. If we think about absolute value of different numbers, the definition is distance. So it doesn't matter which side it's on, it only matters how many spaces there are. So if we only have an absolute value symbol, with no other signs outside, we're going to get a positive answer because it's distance. The only exception to that is if we look at the absolute value of 0, if you're at 0 and you want to know how far away it is, you're already there. So it's going to equal 0, and 0 is not considered positive or negative. The other definition that we need is opposites. Opposites are numbers that are the same distance from 0 on opposite sides. So, for example, 2 and -2 would be opposites. Both are 2 spaces from 0 and they're on opposite sides. Or we could have 5 and its opposite would be -5. Both are 5 spaces from 0 and they're on opposite sides. We need to look at how to read some expressions. So if we have this one, the standard way to read it is as -2. But we could read it as the opposite of 2. So a negative symbol you can say opposite of. Now if you only have this much and you don't have any extra symbols, just read it as -2. But if you have some other symbols, being able to say opposite of might help you clean it up. Let's look at this one for example. Now notice here I have parentheses, not the straight lines, which mean absolute value. The parentheses are only holding the number in there. They have no special meaning. If we read this sign on the outside as the opposite of, it will help us to simplify. So this says the opposite of whatever's inside. So opposite of a -2 would be a +2. And if we had this one, we could read that outside sign as opposite of. So opposite of whatever's inside, so opposite of a +2 would give us -2. So they really didn't need the parentheses on this one, but we can clean it up. Let's go back to some of our absolute value problems and put an extra sign on the outside. When we have absolutes with the straight marks, it's telling us something special to do. It has a special meaning. So we need to do this part first. So this will be the absolute of -3 will be 3. Remember, this is distance. It will be spaces. And for the sign on the outside, you can read it as the opposite of 3, which would be -3, or you can think just bring it down. Either one will work, but it gives you a -3. So we have the opposite of the absolute value. Let's look at another problem. If we have the opposite of the absolute value of 3, they're straight, so we know that they have a special meaning. We need to do the absolute value first. So absolute value of 3 would be 3 spaces. And then we have to deal with the sign on the outside, which says take the opposite of, or we could just bring it down. And this will again give us -3. Think about absolutes for just a minute. Absolutes in general are positive because they're distance. If you take the opposite of a positive number, it's going to give you a negative. So the opposite of an absolute value will give you a negative. Let's look at a mixed group of problems to simplify. The first one is the opposite of the absolute value of -4. So straight lines, absolute value, we need to do that part first. Absolute value would give us 4 spaces. But we have this sign outside. We can say opposite of that or bring it down. The next one, notice, has parentheses. Parentheses has no special meaning. So just read the one on the outside as opposite. Opposite of whatever's inside, opposite of -4 gives us +4. The third one, we have straight lines, special meaning, absolute value. How far is 4 from 0? It is 4 spaces. We don't have any signs on the outside. And the fourth one, notice these are curved. Curved has no special meaning, it's only holding the number inside. So read the outside sign as opposite of. So opposite of 4 gives us a -4.